But isn't that just like the practice of leveraging in the investment realm, where you borrow money from one place and then you invest it somewhere else? As long as the interest you pay on the loan is lower than the yield you get from your investment, you make money. But if the rates flip, you're totally hosed. Essentially, you'd be betting that our unfettered economy would grow faster than any potential threats to it. And given the odds we've gotten from the eggheads who actually know the science and the consequences if we're wrong, that seems like an extremely high-risk bet. Not prudent at all, he mutters. Before we adjourn, are there any other arguments to be made that acting on climate change, even in the face of the stated uncertainty, is pragmatically in our best economic interests? Well, how about this? The solutions are exciting and can maintain our standard of living, like hydrogen fuel cells, cars that run on water, biodiesel. And before you let someone pile on with all the shortcomings of alternative energies, let me point out, they're comparing it to fossil fuels. And it's not a fair comparison, because we're already set up for fossil fuels, which makes them very cheap and easy compared to the technologies of the future. That's why those energy technologies are called alternatives rather than perfects. But here's a newsflash. There's only so much fossil fuels left in the ground. We are going to run out of the stuff, probably in your lifetime. We will move on to the new technologies, almost certainly in the next 50 years. There's a good chance that right now we're right around peak oil, having already burned more than what remains in the ground. And before you parrot the old, "we've got enough coal for 500 years, you better watch the video titled "The Most Important Video You'll Ever See" on my Wondering Mind 42 account. All it takes is some simple arithmetic to show that anyone knowledgeable who feeds you that line about coal is either woefully ignorant or unforgivably manipulative. So it is inevitable that our energy technologies will change, probably in just a couple decades, because we are going to run out of fossil fuels. They will be too valuable as building materials to actually burn in our internal combustion engines. And isn't it true in business that the early innovators are the ones who make the big bucks? Like Ford with cars, Goodyear with rubber and later tires, Microsoft with software. So it's going to happen. You can't deny that. Why not start now, mitigate possible downsides, and make some money in the process? The US could be leading the world in this. We've got the world's greatest higher education system and the best research resources. We could use those to lead in the new energy technologies and to sell it to the rest of the world, increasing our own economic prosperity. The ones that change last lose out. Just look at history. So do we want to be left behind? To make money, you hire the best people to look ahead, and then you position yourself to get in early so that you have the expertise, you have the product, you have the brand, and everyone buys from you. Who's going to be the next Bell? Not those that rely on oil and coal technology. Given all that evidence and reasoning from such credible sources, don't you think that the prudent business leader would agree that the course of action which is most likely to maximize opportunity and minimize cost to protect the economy is to take significant action now to combat global climate change? Doesn't it just seem practical? Now, as for protecting our social and political self-determination, our liberties, the case seems much simpler to me and can be summed up in a single sentence. Democracy cannot survive in a Mad Max world. There's a reason martial law exists as an institution. It's so that when the asteroid hits the fan, the government can do whatever is necessary, even suspending the rights of the individual, in order to secure the greater good for the greater number. Do you think anyone in New Orleans in the days after Katrina gave a rat's ass about civil liberties? No, they were busy looting bottled water and disposable diapers. And had the National Guard gotten there faster, they would have opened up the fire hoses on the looters to ensure order. There's nothing like large-scale natural disaster or threats to national security to bring out the draconian in any government. I often hear the very strident objection, action on AGW would lead to government control of our lives. Well, given what the scientists say about the probability of AGW being real versus it being a huge, elaborate hoax, isn't it more likely that the greatest long-term threat to your liberties is inaction? And if you're concerned about national autonomy, here's 2 words to whet your appetite for developing renewable energies. Energy independence. Here's 2 more. Goodbye OPEC. So, back to protecting your economic self-determination. When I was asking around for credible predictions of the economic costs of unnecessary action, one exasperated skeptic finally complained, predictions of economic models are even more uncertain than climate models. I did a double take, because if that's the case, then where the heck is the wisdom in ignoring the warnings of the climate models based on the even less reliable predictions of the economic models? But it's even more lopsided than that, because none of the economic models actually even predict nasty economic consequences of action. All of the economic doom and gloom predictions seem to be conjecture by sources at the bottom of the credibility spectrum. Does this really sound like the best bet for protecting your economic well-being? How well is the field of economics known for making correct predictions? That is, how often do economists' predictions come true? Sometimes, sometimes not. How often do the predictions of science come true? When you fly in a jet airliner, or use your cell phone, or turn on your tap water, or get on the internet, or take Advil. I'm not saying science or scientists are infallible. I'm just saying that when it comes to comparing the predictive power of science versus the predictive power of economics, who's your daddy? No, wait, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, in our business analogy, when you're looking for a reliable track record in making predictions, the resume of science far outweighs the resume of economics. Both have their place, both are useful, both make mistakes. One isn't intrinsically better than the other. But if you're going to put them head to head, which, make no mistake, is what you're doing if your answer to why not act just in case is because it would cost too much, then you've got to give the job to science. Hey, wait a minute, someone says. Science isn't so hot. Remember when the eggheads were all certain in the 1970s that the globe was going into an ice age that never materialized? They're always screaming some Chicken Little story. So why should we listen now? A totally understandable sentiment. But it turns out that the claim that scientists in the 70s were warning of an impending ice age is a classic urban myth, originating in some over-hysterical media coverage about an NAS report that was actually trying to say the climate is changing and we better figure out how to understand it better. That's why it's so important to distinguish between media stories and what the organizations are actually saying. There was nothing back then even comparable to the unprecedented statements today that most every scientific society is making about global warming. But don't believe me. You go look it up for yourself what the scientists said during the 70s ice age scare. Not just what the media said the scientists said. Go look up what the scientists said. The NES report that was the source of that urban myth is available in its entirety online. And remember to evaluate your sources. George Will is not a reliable resource on what NAS said. NAS is. It's true, you can always find some doom and gloom story in the history books and newspaper archives. But look around now and then do some digging. Look at the extent and quality of the warnings made now about global climate change. When you have all of these scientific societies and all of these profit-driven companies lining up with the usual suspects of all the environmental organizations, something profoundly different must be going on now. You will not find, ever in history, a warning with this level and widespread extent of weighty opinion and analysis behind it. I'm serious, don't take my word for it. Go look in yourself, and it'll transform you. Remember the warning about confirmation bias from the video Nature of Science. Don't just stop when you find something that supports what you already think. Go further. See if you can find the refutation to that. You'll see that never before have so many professional societies issued so many warnings in such strong words. Never before have so many companies vested in the status quo publicly called for change, for government regulation of themselves. I think you'll see that to dismiss this as another Chicken Little story just because it seems to predict doomsday, like so many failed doomsday predictions before, is not just irrational, it's downright reckless. Sometimes the wolf is at the door. I believe you want the best for yourself. I even believe you probably want the best for the whole world. I think if you try to become brutally aware of your thinking, your biases, whether your goal is in looking for information is to get closer to the physical truth or to just strengthen your opinion, whether you're starting from belief or starting from evidence, if you analyze this in historical perspective, you will see that we are in a time like no other. Because our population and our technology are large enough to change the planet, the old way of thinking, where we could tolerate mistakes, no longer serves us. Because this time it's global. There's no longer anywhere to move on to. Whether you're a tree hugger or a tree logger, pro-life or pro-choice, communist or laissez-faire, fascist or libertarian, you still want economic and political self-determination. And I hope you've seen that using basic risk assessment and weighing all the factors from all the sources, it is in your best interest to do everything you can to increase public demand for significant policy changes to combat global warming. Because science unequivocally says that the bottom row is more likely than the top row. And if you think about it, this situation down here is a much greater threat to your economic and political self-determination than this up here. You can have a little bit of government regulation up here or a draconian government down here. If you're still not convinced, then I'll meet you at your next video. I hope I'm wrong.